All right, everybody. Your Auburn Tigers are still undefeated. They moved to 7-0 with a 65 to 60 win over St. Louis, and it was quite the game that we're going to get to talk about today. It
Whoo!
looked like the winning streak, 43 straight non-conference home games that Auburn has now won. It goes years back. So that streak stays intact. The undefeated season, I think there's only 24 teams left nationally that are undefeated. Man, it got dark. It looked like some of that was going to come to an end, but Auburn pulled through, and we're going to get into it. Ben Young is here again for this episode. Ben,
Yeah, my apologies, everyone. I'm back.
hey, everybody's pumped about it. Initial thoughts, man. We just watched this game. We're recording right after. What'd you think?
Well, we just got a text from our good buddy Jackson Garrett, who can't be with us this week, that says, "Man, I love winning," and I want to echo that sentiment right here on the pod. There is nothing better than winning, and I got to say, this didn't feel as close as some of our other close games towards the end there. We had that timeout a little under 4 minutes left, and from there on, we kind of took this game back over. It was a very exciting win, but I think a pretty solid win.
For sure. I well, okay. Let's start with the MVP. We got a little. We started a little late last time. We're going to get back to our traditional
All right.
model here.
All right.
So couple. I'm going to throw out some candidates, and we'll kind of talk about their merits. That'll give people a good idea if you weren't able to watch the game, kind of some of the key points. So Wendell Green led the team with 22 points on 14 shots. Most importantly, um, he did turn it over 3 times, only 1 assist, but man, he provided some scoring where we needed it. He was up to the challenge to kind of battle Yuri Collins. So that's number one. Number two, I don't think he gets it, but I think the all around game of Jalen Williams was vital in this game on both ends. I think he sustained us through some bad periods. I would have liked
Huge.
seen him step up more in the second half. We'll get to all that. Number three, probably not going to win MVP, but we have to mention it. Our savior today, KD Johnson, coming out of nowhere when Auburn was down 5 fairly late in this game, last 2 or 3 minutes, made 2 huge driving layups through contact, no foul, still finishes the shot, and then just an unbelievable pass to open up a fast break to get what ended up being the go-ahead point. So those 3 guys, I think, are the nominees. What are your MVP thoughts?
I mean, yeah, it's always exciting, I know, for you to be able to talk about how Jalen Williams continues to fill the stat sheet for Auburn in a really big way tonight. He stepped up and did so many things so well. Fantastic defensive rebounding. He had some really great assists. He had a couple of assists tonight that were crucial, where he was crashing in the lane and then finding the open guy, which is something that I've been begging for a lot. But more importantly, he had 3 steals tonight. Huge, huge in a game where how close is this turnover battle? We won the turnover battle by no. I'm reading that wrong. The turnover battle was dead even, 12-12, both directions. So every single one of them was crucial for manufacturing points, and Jalen had a huge part in that. I think we have to knock him down a few pegs just because at the end of the game, he had such a horrific inbound pass. It didn't cost us. We wound up forcing them into a long contested 3-pointer. But for me, this was a game that was all about momentum, and you could tell we needed it. We were all texting in the group chat, who's going to get us the points right now? We're coming down to the wire. We need some points. We need to get and then stretch a lead. And KD Johnson was that guy. He crashed into the lane. He looked like he still had the legs that we needed to run the floor, make the passes, and just bring that swagger back.
Absolutely. I'm with you there. So I think maybe there's 2 categories here. The MVP for this game, I think, is Wendell Green Jr. I think that's a fairly safe pick, but we would be doing a disservice if we didn't. I'm sure we're going to focus a lot on KD and what he accomplished and why that's so important for this group specifically. But KD, man, I said this before we started recording. I'm going to give him a little 30 seconds here, and then maybe we can gush about Wendell a little bit as we officially crown him. At least in my opinion, you can push back on this, but KD to
Nope.
me, I struggle. I struggle with KD. If you listen to this podcast last year, that's the case. Like the middle school basketball coach in me just sometimes struggles with the things that he takes unnecessary risks. He takes some really poor shots, He makes some really poor decisions at key moments that actually happened today in the second half a couple of times. But man, when the game is on the line and everybody gets tight, he is the loosest, coolest cat in the room. He makes tough shots. We've at this point, it's not a an aberration. Last year, he did the same thing as his first year on the team. The plays he made down the stretch and the confidence with which he plays for a team that is offensively challenged, like Auburn is at times, I just think it's invaluable. There's not another guy like him in the country, and today is just a reflection of how glad I am he's on this team.
Big time. KD Johnson has the memory of a goldfish, and we love him for it. He missed a wide open 3-pointer earlier. The camera cut right to him as he dropped an F-bomb. But then you turn around and he's immediately back jawing in someone's face, hustling on defense. He does not remember the bad things that he does. He believes he is the best athlete on the floor. He believes he is going to score every time he goes to the bucket. And when we're struggling, that's what we need. We need somebody that is going to put out the noise and just play ball. And that's KD to a T. But part of the reason why Wendell Green has got to be the MVP tonight is he went up against one of the top point guards in the country, Yuri Collins. Yuri Collins had himself a game. We were fortunate that he got into foul trouble early in the first half and sat for a pretty long period to end that first half. But Wendell Green Jr. was the better point guard on the floor tonight. He was the better scorer. He was the better driver. And he didn't have his assist game tonight, in part because Janai Broome missed a lot of head scratching shots tonight. But Wendell was the guy who was able to get him the ball in there. And more importantly for me, Wendell was our point guard. We got nothing out of Chance Westry tonight, which is absolutely shocking to me. And they don't have the minutes loaded yet, so I'm not really sure just how much he played. But we did not see Trey Donaldson at all tonight.
If you look on here, if you pull up your Zoom, I should be screen sharing for those watching on YouTube. 33 minutes for Wendell and Julian, and only 7 minutes for Johan and Chance in their backup roles at those positions, which, like you said, no Trey as well. So maybe this is a sign. Not again, Chance and Johan are going to play. They're going to be in this 10-man rotation. But this looks more like what Jabari played last year, what Walker played last year, 30 minutes, kind of getting the bulk of that. And by the way, Yuri did sit out. Yuri still played 34 minutes. So he played either of those guys. So all that to say, I completely agree with you. Wendell came to play today. We needed the scoring. He hit a couple threes. He's always going to take a couple that you're like, but honestly, for me, with this team and what I've seen through 7 games, I'm going to give Wendell some leeway because sometimes the offense just isn't coming from other sources. And sometimes our best look is going to be him taking a long, semi-open three. Like, I think we're just going to have to live with that. And if he makes 33% like he did tonight, that's great. Mm-hmm. The thing I always say about him, he missed a couple free throws, but 6 for 8 is good. He got to the line. I just felt like, for me, I'm always looking at his efficiency, right? 22 points on 14 shots is so good for him. If he can do that, we're going to be in a really good position in a lot of games.
Yeah, more importantly, he shot 50% from the floor overall tonight. Yep. He had a couple of key buckets at the end of the game to really put this one away, in addition to his free throw shooting. But you saw, I think he was aware of what KD was doing on the floor and seeing that there were cutting lanes available for a guy. If you could make your first person miss on that first cut, and that's always been where Wendell has excelled as a smaller guard. But it was fascinating early on. It seemed like he might have one of those nights because he hit a couple of threes early. And I think his first basket was that mid-range jumper that was just beautiful. He got to the corner of the stripe and pulled up and hit it. And he looked like he was ready to do battle with Yuri Collins tonight.
And he did. I guess we should talk about Yuri. Well, we'll officially crown Wendell Green Jr. the MVP today as we get a little more organized in our Ben and my podcast thing. Yuri Collins, if Jackson was here, we could gush about it. 10 points, 9 assists. He took 13 shots. So again, not quite as efficient. I personally, I thought Auburn's game plan against Collins was fantastic. I think, we've talked to these coaches on the podcast, the assistant coaches. They split up the scout. I would love to know who had the scout for St. Louis, because early on, Auburn's defense was completely locked in to what St. Louis wanted to do. We were doing a lot of off-ball switches, we knew what plays they were going to run, what sets, and we had preset like what we were going to do defensively. I thought we made Zep Jasper made life hard for him in certain stretches of this game. We made him work
Oh
for
yeah.
everything he got and forced 4 turnovers from him, which is very unlike him. He's one of the assist to turnover leaders in the country in terms of the ratio there. So forcing him for me, one of the big stats from this game, Wendell Green turning it over less than Yuri Collins, is a big part of why Auburn holds on to win a close game.
And we held Yuri Collins to 0 for 3 from the 3-point line. He didn't have an open look from 3 all night. And he was 0 of 2 from the line. And I think a lot of that has to do with the aggressiveness with which we play defense. When you see people missing free throws late in the game, late in the second half, a lot of that comes down to conditioning. Are you able to step up to the line, get yourself in form, and do what you know how to do when you hit those free throws? And when you've been run up and down the court all night, that is a challenge.
Absolutely, and we have to mention that, right? I mean, I think you're our free throw savant king on the podcast. Now, what's wild, I think I have this right, if the stats on ESPN were right. St. Louis was 3 for 3 in the first half, which I did want to point out. Great job by Auburn. I don't think we committed a foul for the first 9 minutes, and the defense was great. It wasn't like we were lazy, not playing good defense. We just weren't fouling, and that helped in the first half. Second half, I've never seen this. I've watched college basketball forever. 1 for 11 from the free throw line for St. Louis. That's obviously going to be their thing coming out of this game. If we just hit half of those, we at least have a really good chance of winning. But you have to give some credit to Neville Arena, the jungle, the depth, the pace, the intensity. This was a physical, intense game. And I do think all those factors add up. Maybe not to 1 for 11 and a half. That's pretty unbelievable. But I think all those pieces get some credit for that statistic.
Yeah, and in a 5-point win, you can argue that 5 of those points were taken from the charity stripe by the atmosphere, by the game plan, by all the little things that you need to do to take advantage of those situations when you're in them.
That's a huge stat. Here's something else too. Look, I mean, we're going to mention this every game. It's for Auburn crucial. Bruce apparently told the announcers today before, he's like, for me for this game, if we hit 8 or 9 threes, I'm going to feel great. Well, obviously we were 3 for 16 from 3. We hit, I think, all 3 of those like in the first half, somewhat early, if I'm remembering right. Flanagan
Yeah,
hit
that's
one.
right, because those are all first half 3-pointers.
So it just completely shut down. To Auburn's credit, let me make my point, and then I'll circle back. 19%, 19% from 3 for Auburn, and you win against a St. Louis team that probably could be a 5 or a 6 seed according to Bruce Pearl this week. That's what he kind of thinks of them. But we won. We outshot them from the field at 41% to their 38%. We attacked inside. We made an adjustment when the threes stopped falling. We didn't overshoot it. I know we had a few that were really uncalled for and maybe not great shot selection. I was impressed. This is the most post-ups I've ever seen in Auburn basketball create. We did not always finish them with Janai Broome and Jalen Williams, but I love that. I love that we're learning who we are enough to adjust and really go inside. And ultimately, I think besides the free throw discrepancy, the fact that we were able to outshoot them on a night where we're 3 for 16 from 3, that's a big reason why you win the game.
Oh yeah, and again, we love to go back to our efficiency numbers. They shot the ball 65 times tonight. We only shot it 59 times tonight. So even though we have a couple of moments where we get flashes of last year of, oh no, we're about to shoot ourselves out of a game here, this team continues with its shot selection to put itself in a position to win. And before we move on from shooting, do we want to talk a little bit about some of Janai's struggles?
Yeah, I think that's a great. Let's talk about overall the offense, shooting, what we saw, because I do think that's going to be the storyline is that we follow through the rest of the year.
Yeah, so Janai, we had a fantastic night in terms of getting him the ball. He shot the ball 14 times. He did take 1 3-pointer, which to St. Louis's credit, they had a fantastic defense where they were just leaving our centers open at the top of the key to let us move the ball through there. I think that motion did not fool them at all tonight, and they didn't overcommit, which, handed to St. Louis. They played a great defensive game. But we continue to see Janai Broome make some unbelievable shots. He had a catch and reverse layup underneath the basket that was such a boom, boom, fantastic scoring play late in the second half when we really needed it, that you understand why he's viewed as such a savvy senior center. But he sometimes will just miss these easy 2 foot away baskets that you have to wonder if there's some injury issues or if it's just him continuing to adjust to his new life in Neville Arena. But he hits 50% from the floor and we run away with this game. And I think he was capable of that tonight. It just didn't fall.
It's a great point. He got a lot of post touches, like we said. He got a lot of rebounds. I would love to know. He had 8 rebounds. I feel like at least 3 or 4 of those were offensive, where he was putting it back up or had a tip in opportunity and just couldn't quite finish it. It does just feel like he is this close. Like hopefully the second half of non-conference play can like continue to ease him in, and then he might face another little struggle point when we get into SEC play. But I think on a team that has this many challenges offensively, I like making him a big part of this offense. And the best thing I loved about today, we used him in a good way where we run our set, and then if there's 8 or 10 seconds left on the shot clock, instead of for years with Auburn's offense, it's just like, all right, give it to the point guard and maybe run a pick up at the top and then see if he'll shoot a 3 or get. I love that we like 5 or 6 times we just throw it into Janai Broome one-on-one and let him work. And I still believe he has the skill set to really be a more efficient, more effective scorer. We've seen it on some nights. Like when it's on, it's a huge piece to our offense. And I personally, I'm just glad we're using him wisely. I really feel like we are, even though the results tonight were iffy.
Yeah, again, just talking about shot selection and the way that we use our offense, we're now seeing a team do all of the things that we wished that they could do last year. They just haven't brought it all together and executed it, with the exception of maybe the Bradley game, which, again, that was a game that we absolutely ran away with. So you can see the potential is there for this team to be really good in so many facets of the game. I mean, you look at a guy like Dylan Cardwell. Dylan, our do-it-all boy, he took 1 shot tonight.
And it was a terrible shot. It was a horrific shot.
It really was. I don't know. It was a head scratcher. But, Dylan came in and was harassing on defense. He had some really good rebound game. He got in a little bit of foul trouble tonight, which we would have liked to not see. But part of that was that aggressiveness of his defense, which honestly I wouldn't trade. I feel the same way about him on defense as I do about Flanagan. If he gives up a bad foul or 2, I'll take that, because he's fresh legs coming onto the floor and he's going to make you work for it. And occasionally we'll have nights like tonight where, if you send the guy to the line, they still have to make those free throws. They're not automatic points, and that can make a big difference. But where Dylan did contribute heavily was the block party.
Absolutely. 11 blocks. Another huge reason, and this is kind of one of those games. Jackson, if he was here, he would say, well, this is kind of the difference in a Power 5 and a smaller conference team, right? Like St. Louis, you could see they're a veteran, well-coached. They're going to be a dangerous team all year and in March. They're going to be in the tournament. Like they are a very good team. But they got nervous going inside against, because you've got, if it's not Cardwell, it's Broome. If it's not Jalen, it's Johan, who's a big body. Like we just have lots of guys that can block shots. So 11 blocks, continuing our reign of America's best block team. Great to see, especially against a quality opponent like this.
Oh yeah, and you mentioned Jalen too. We'll occasionally get a block from Flanagan. I've seen us get a block from Chance Westry. Yep. We have a team with very active hands defensively, and what's been great to watch early this season is that has led to most of our fast break points, either a strong block that we can keep in bounds or those active hands that force a quick turnover. We had a couple of Hamburglar moments tonight, not from KD, but from the team generally.
We did. You're right. Now, I would love, do you have pulled up, what was Janai Broome's block number? Because he had to have had 7, 6.
No, Janai finished with 8. We had triple double watch towards the end of that game. He finished with 8 rebounds, 8 blocks, and 11 points.
Yeah, we've got to mention that. And honestly, it's probably a disservice to Janai that I didn't mention him in the MVP discussion, because, he missed a lot of inside shots and things he could probably clean up. But man, I thought he was a great presence on defense, rebounding, got a lot of tough. This was a scrappy game. 8 blocks, like that's elite Walker Kessler level. We knew he was a great shot blocker. I love that we replaced Kessler with him. But man, I think this was the clearest view of like that translates. Like I think that part of his game, at times he hasn't looked like he's had the same he hasn't looked as athletic at
His
times.
touch,
Maybe
his touch is not there.
right.
That kind of is that kind of has been the biggest missing moment in his game. His ability to quickly get the ball inside and orient himself to the hoop seems to be what we're missing from him. You want to talk about that athleticism? It seems to be taking him just an extra step to know that he's in the position he wants to be to turn around and jump. And my hope is we see him continue to emerge like we saw Kessler last year. We didn't really see Kessler come on until that LSU game. And that was a game where he wasn't just blocking shots left and right. He became the force inside that knew where he was on the floor, and at 7 feet tall was just too quick for everybody else.
It's a great point. You always forget. And by the way, can I blow your mind? I don't know if you listened to this was one of the podcasts. No one knows this. I didn't. Jackson didn't. Janai Broome, by the way, is classified as a sophomore. He's played 2 years
Wow.
at Morehead State, and I guess maybe because of COVID, or maybe he had an injury at some point in one of those years, he is listed as a sophomore on our roster. So that's insane, first of all, about the possibilities, because I don't quite think he's like a great fit in the NBA the way the game is played now. So you could theoretically be looking at a couple of years of having him around, which is cool.
When you have to think too, in the age of the NIL, that's part of what kept Oscar Tshiebwe coming back one more year. Is he stood a chance to make more money staying in college. And so for some of these guys whose games aren't going to translate as quickly to the NBA, you're better off staying home and being a hometown hero and making some NIL money than even going to Europe, which is a huge deal for college basketball.
It's a great point. The only thing I would add about Broome, we can move on, is I feel like through the first 6 games, I was more like Cardwell is kind of our defensive stopper. And I still agree, as a center, his ability to guard on the perimeter he had a couple of tough shots hit on him today, but he played terrific defense. And Broome doesn't have that. But tonight was the first game where I felt like Broome, as an interior presence, as a shot blocker, as that big guy waiting in the paint, I honestly felt like he was right on that level of Cardwell. The way he played tonight was fantastic on that end.
Yeah, that's been one of the slightly more frustrating things about his offensive game is we've continued to watch defensively. He has grown and grown and grown, and it's almost like he's watching film of Cardwell and Kessler and like figuring out where he needs to be to follow. And tonight it really showed up in the block line for him. Some of that is playing a bit of a smaller team in St. Louis, but they have some size there. A lot of their guards are 6'3". They have some tall forwards. They have a couple of 6'11" guys. And so yeah, apologies to Janai Broome. This was a fantastic night anywhere else, but from what we know he can do, this is kind of more of a pedestrian night. He hits a few more of those turnarounds. He gets a few putbacks in place, and we're definitely talking a very serious competition with Wendell for MVP.
I was going to say, if he throws up 28-8 and we win by 10 or 15, it probably would have been his, honestly.
Oh yeah.
So one guy I want to mention, and then one trend. Flanigan quietly. I'm almost worried that this is wrong, but he had 7 points. He did hit a 3. He missed 4 others. He was 3 for 9, whatever. 10 rebounds, leading the team in rebounds as a big. You mentioned the defensive ability. He had a few great possessions defensively with his length, with his athleticism. Looks great on that dunk. I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast specifically, but KD makes this pass, like a great Janai Broome block leads to KD in the corner on his end, and he literally just fires like a quarterback pass on perfect stride to Alan Flanigan, who goes up with the left hand with the hammer dunk. And I think that put us up. Did that give us the lead or put us up 3?
I believe that put us up by 3 points there.
It was huge. I mean, and the guts of KD to throw that pass is we could do a whole other podcast on.
Well, and speaking of Janai too, on the replay you can see Janai with his big long arm is pointing to where Flanigan is. So even if KD couldn't see over, you've got the indication of put the ball down here.
Right.
And yeah, that's some trust. That's some veteran to veteran stuff. And yeah, we're not going to talk about Flanigan and Jalen, I feel like, as much this season because they're going to be a little bit more quiet in what they do, but they are going to fill up the stat sheet in those crucial ways that in these close games are what makes the difference.
Well, and here's the trend I was going to mention. So, and a couple things. So what you're seeing is in these big last couple games where they're super tight, you're starting to see what we always see. Some people would call this shortening the rotation. It's not necessarily shortening the rotation. What it does tell you in games like this is who do your coaches trust and who do they want on the floor? So Chris Moore is still starting. Zep Jasper's still starting. But, Zep played 16 minutes. Chris played 13. Flanagan off the bench played 27 at that three. Today was the first game, by the way, for nerds out there. We played straight up 10-man rotation with two guys playing each spot. Bruce kind of followed through. Chance did not play anywhere else. He played backup point guard for 7 minutes. Johan played backup power forward for 7 minutes. And the trend I was going to point out, we continue to lean more and more on these veterans, right? The Katie Johnsons, the Jalen Williams, Wendell Green Jr., Janai Broom is one of those veterans from a different program, Flanagan. Like those were your top five guys minutes wise. And as excited as we get about the potential of a Johan Traore and the potential of a Chance Westry, it's just a reminder of how special Jabari Smith was last year as a great player coming out of high school, and B, you just can't undervalue or you can't overvalue enough the experience of playing tough college basketball games. And we have a set of 4 or 5 guys who are going to be, if we're going to have a great year, I'm becoming more and more convinced it's going to be that group of veterans that has to get us where we want to go.
For sure, because you can see in the clutch situations, they're not phased, particularly guys like Katie and Flanagan, where last year we saw a little bit of frustration from Flanagan with his inability to be his regular offensive self. He's already had some games early this year where he's been able to be the scoring guy. And when he's not, it doesn't itch him nearly as much. He doesn't get that itch of I need to force something. He settles back into his role. He quietly collects double-digit rebounds and makes his big splash play opportunities, almost in a Cambridge methodology. Cambridge was one of those guys for us last year. He'd be really, really quiet, but then suddenly when you need a big splash play, here he comes running on the cut with a thunderous dunk, and the entire arena explodes. And tonight, that guy was Alan Flanagan.
It's a great point. And again, I think now, well, two things. We were worried about Flanagan. What would his attitude be this year? Is he trying to have this amazing year and put up stats and get to the NBA? He has been, from what I've seen, tangible wise, being at one game in person, I think he is filling his role well. He's not really forcing a ton, which I think when he's at his best offensively, he's going to have his moments on this team. We need him to hit those open shots. I think you mentioned that. We're going to need that at different points. But I'm just really happy with how he's, kind of like you said, he's settled in. He's not forcing the issue, but he is there. And I think we all know he is a more dangerous weapon consistently than Chris Moore. And I think now you're really seeing our closing five is our closing five. And it's Wendell, Katie, Flanagan, Jalen, and Broom, and then maybe Cardwell for defensive purposes at certain points, closing games. And I personally, that's good for this team. We need to start defining these roles, to use a Jackson Garrett term.
And what that's going to do is it's going to take pressure off of guys like Chance Westry and like Johan that need more time to emerge. They're not going to feel like if I don't hit a certain amount of time or a certain amount of points, I'm not doing my job. It's like, no, that's not the job that we need you to do right now. And similarly, we've seen the same starting five now through 7 games. And one of the most impressive things about those guys has been their defense. We're not scoring a ton early in that first rotation, but we're also not giving up a ton of baskets, and we're making teams work. And I think that's going to be Bruce's strategy the whole year. Because again, if we go 5 minutes and we're up 4-0, I think Bruce takes that every time. Because again, he knows our 11 is better than your 7, is better than your 8, or in this case tonight is better than your 9. Although they had a guy that only played 8 minutes. So, well, we had 2 guys that only played 7 minutes. So in a lot of ways, it was a 7-on-7. But yeah, I think Bruce trusts his guys and his conditioning to know that we're going to be able to outlast a lot of teams by playing good defense, by hitting our free throws, and by forcing other teams to take tough shots.
It's a great point. And the other thing I love about it is it gives 2 of your most respected guys in the locker room, who are also 2 of your oldest guys, Zep Jasper and Chris Moore. They are starting for this team. Now, they're not going to play starters minutes, I think, as the season goes on. They're going to kind of be, but having them for their defensive purposes, it also it keeps those guys a little more engaged. And I love, like you said, I'm so thrilled with how Jalen's playing, not only as a huge Jalen fan, but also you hit the nail on the head. We don't need to force. Some people think basketball, like you have to get these guys shots to get them to develop. That's not that team basketball with 10 or 11 players. That's not how it works. I love Johan and Chance being able to grow, and we're going to need them. Don't get me wrong. I still think we're going to need them at key points this year, but I love that they're able to play 7 minutes each tonight. And they clearly, they weren't bad, but they weren't going to be the difference makers against a good St. Louis team. And they played their minutes, they played okay, but we don't have to have it right now. And I'm really encouraged by that.
Yeah, Jackson hates the plus minus stat, but I think it's the single greatest indicator of your overall efficiency as both a basketball team, but also it's the best way to understand your role in the team as an individual player. So if you're coming in and your plus minus is, you know, 2 or 4 points, especially in a positive direction, that makes such an enormous difference in a game where you need to be able to rotate guys out and maintain the flow of your team. And so that's what we're going to be looking to see from guys like Chance and Johan going forward is on that second and third rotation. Can they come in? Can they hold the line? And can they play discipline within themselves?
Right. No, it's a great point. The only other thing I wanted to mention was maybe we kind of glossed over it. Just to be clear, Auburn was down 58-53, I think, with about 3:18 to go, something like that, at home. I'm a huge proponent in college basketball of basically the race to the last TV timeout. Like that is so much of what college basketball is. Can you be ahead so that the other team has to eventually foul you, put you on the line, and it's hard to come back when you're down 5 with 3 minutes to go. Is my point. Auburn hit them with this barrage that we talked about, Katie Johnson, but a 12-2 run to close this game out. And I don't want to just point to the depth and the pace and the physicality like we've talked about, but I was just really impressed with Auburn's response, really with a not great second half up to that point at all. I mean, you and I think we're texting like it just we didn't do a lot to deserve this game, but St. Louis left the door open with those free throws, and then Auburn was able to just slam that door, wide open. They took advantage of the opportunity, and I think it's a great learning experience for this group as they continue to gel and grow.
Yeah, Bruce might have overhyped St. Louis a little bit, but we don't need to overlook the fact that they're a pretty good basketball team. They were picked to finish second in the Atlantic 10. So the odds of them making the tournament are higher than a lot of teams that we're going to see over the next few days in the lead up to our great Pacific West Coast tour. But yeah, credit to St. Louis. Their defense in the second half really stepped up and forced us to take some difficult shots. If we get a little bit more consistent finishing close to the basket inside, that's going to be the difference for us. But you still look at a situation where the ball wasn't bouncing our way a whole lot and we were down. And when they left that door open, we put our heads down and charged through it in a Katie Johnson bull rush.
Everybody's got to take advantage of their opportunities. And I think the coaches are really going to have to get these guys. Like, my biggest fear with this group offensively is that they just get tight. Because when shots don't fall for 5 or 6 minutes, it's hard. It's hard to have that confidence that Bruce wants them to shoot with, whether it's inside, whether it's outside. Like when we get a good shot, we expect to take it and make it. And that's how he's always coached. I worry that these long dry stretches, these dry spells, and I felt like for the first time this year, even in that crappy game the other night where we only scored 43 points, I didn't quite feel like everybody was freaking out. I felt a little bit of panic in the second half when nobody could hit their opportunities. And I think the big problem, if we're going to pick on Jalen, and I love Jalen, but he is the last 2 weeks has been one of the best players on this team offensively. It is so easy for him to go 10 or 15 minutes and a half without shooting. And Bruce is having to call a lot of plays to get him the ball down there or a pick and pop at the 3-point line. Jalen's got to get more aggressive in the regular flow of the offense when Bruce isn't force feeding him the ball. Like that's the next step for his development offensively, I think.
And I think the tricky part for him tonight was that we kept getting Janai such good looks inside that it's hard to want to get away from what's clearly working. The idea that we can get the ball to our big man in the paint in a one-on-one, they weren't nearly collapsing in the same way that we saw in the last game. They left Janai one-on-one a lot. And if he's hitting a couple of those, they're going to have to start to help, and that opens up Jalen. One of the things that we didn't really see tonight was a lot of pick and roll with him in that kind of power forward spot that I would have liked to see a little bit more late in the game. But part of that had to do with just how well they were defending Wendell towards that second half.
It's a good point. I'm encouraged by the variety. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just glad we're doing different things and we're learning enough about this group that the coaches. I give Bruce and this staff a hard time. I think they do a lot of things well. I don't think half court offense is one of them a lot of times. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. But I really felt like tonight, even though the results weren't always perfect, I really thought we did a good job. People are going to look at threes and say, well, why are you're 3 for 16? Every college basketball team is going to shoot 15 threes in a game. It's just the way the game is played now. I think people just need to but I'm just glad we're not shooting 25 or 30 of them because
Yes.
in years past, without Broom as a weapon, without Jalen as a weapon inside, that would easily be what we would have done tonight, and we would have lost.
And we saw Jalen stay really patient. He only took one 3-pointer tonight, which is unusual for him. And I think part of that was he was playing more minutes at kind of the 4 position than the 3. We
Yep.
manufactured a lot of great looks at 3 from Flanagan tonight. And unfortunately, he was only 1 for 5 from the 3-point line, which is a bit of an aberration for him this season. When we've had him in that role where he's coming off a screen to catch and shoot, he's been pretty good. He's been in that 30 to 40% range. And again, if we see him hit some of those tonight, I think we run away with this game a little bit more than we did. The challenging thing is we're going to have nights because we don't have a pure shooter like we did with Jabari that can play that forward role and come off of a screen and pull up and hit a jumper. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge for us because there's going to be nights where those don't fall. But this year, even more so than last year, I just see this team being patient and finding other different ways to attack the basket rather than just saying, well, that one didn't go in. Let me shoot another one. Let me shoot another one. Even Wendell tonight, he had a couple of pull-ups in the second half where it's like, oh boy, he's heat checking himself. He's going to see if that shot is there. And once he realized it was not there, he didn't continue.
Yep.
Instead, what he did was he hung around and at the end of the game made some impressive drives to the basket in that fearless way that we really need from him at the end of the game.
Absolutely. And the more times he gets to do that in these moments, in these kind of games, like Jared Harper got so much better at that from his freshman year to his junior year because he just kept having the ball in his hands in key moments late in the game. And when you're the point guard of an offense, especially this one that is so point guard driven, you just need reps. And honestly, I think he got a ton of great work last year, but I think he's just going to continue to blossom. And that's part of the improvement that I thought we could see from Wendell. The proof will be in the pudding in SEC play for him. That's going to be what we judge him on ultimately this year against bigger, more physical teams. But great to see that. I wanted an in-season transfer from this Jimerson guy. That is exactly what we need on Auburn's basketball team. Great shooter. He shot 9 threes, and every time he shot, you thought it was going in when you were an Auburn fan. You were nervous.
Yeah, it's interesting how somehow we can't seem to find that guy. We've got so many amazing transfers in. We're able to recruit these incredible 6'10" freshmen that are ready for minutes from the time they walk on campus. We can't find a guy that's 6'2" that is just a catch and shoot guard. And I don't know why.
And
Bruce, we need it.
and I did want to. I'm just remembering all these things. St. Louis averaged 83 points a game this year so far. We held them to 60. Some of that was free throws, but overall, we did a really good job on them. But man, you could feel it. I said something in our group text, and immediately after that, we miscommunicated, and just one false step, not doing your assignment right, led to an open look, and Yuri Collins was going to find somebody, or Jimerson was going to hit a 3 in your face, and it just shows against the good teams that we're going to play. Our defense has elite ceiling. I think you've said that a lot. They can be elite, but they're not. They're never going to be perfect. But the more we can cut down on, I think we really could have had St. Louis in like the 40s or 50s tonight if we had just not fallen asleep at a couple key moments on possessions. But it was a great lesson for me as a fan just watching how tightly locked in you have to be every possession for 40 minutes to be a great defensive team. And I think we have that capability. But man, this team today made us pay when we didn't do that.
Oh yeah, there were a couple of moments where we got caught swagging out a little bit,
Yes.
and like Wendell hit a fantastic layup to put us up by 3, and then they immediately came back down the floor and scored a quick 2 because we were too busy excited about, all right, we've got a lead that we know we can hold for at least one more possession. And St. Louis never quit. They came right back in and attacked the basket, and brought it close again. And it's one of those things where you just want to be like, guys, just hold on for a little bit longer, keep the focus, and then you can really celebrate. But honestly, for me, a lot of that is just like some of those head scratching fouls. I'll take that. I want a team that knows when they're about to step on your neck and doesn't mind flexing a little bit, even if it means you've got to play a little bit harder for a little bit longer. I like that attitude.
And that's where the depth comes in. We can
Oh
do
yeah,
that. Like we can afford to bring Cardwell can do that because he plays 15 to 20 minutes a game. Like he can do all the things. KD even coming off the bench, like he has some flexibility there. Only other guy, St. Louis is getting SEC transfers. Javon Pickett was a really good player at Missouri, and he had an almost identical line to Wendell without the free throws. He had 16 points, led him in scoring, 5 rebounds, 7 of 14 from the field. That's a good player. Him and Jimerson and Yuri Collins, and then some of their big guys. I was impressed with St. Louis's physicality. So just wanted to point him out. I thought he was really impressive. And again, this day of college basketball where everybody's moving around, like before this game, I had no idea that they had an SEC transfer, playing starters. They were starting for them.
yeah. We played against quite a few SEC transfers, but one of the other things that I think was hugely important, and a little bit of it was garbage time fouls, but Pickett fouled out. We didn't have a guy foul out tonight. We didn't really have anybody get in too much foul trouble tonight, which is another thing that's very huge for us. When games start to feel like they're going to get away from us, it's usually because we're picking up unnecessary fouls and we're having to get off our rotation, which I know drives Bruce up a wall. It's like, listen, I understand that there's going to be some fouls. You're going to have some moments where Flanagan or KD gets too aggressive. But the big thing is we don't want to get off of our rotation, and we don't want them coming in key moments
Yep.
where Flanagan's got to sit because he's got 3 fouls. Janai's got to sit because he's got 3 fouls when you don't want them already sitting.
Man, I'm so glad we won this game. I'm not even gonna lie. 7-0
Yeah.
feels good if you're paying attention around the league. Tennessee goes and wins a tournament, beats Kansas. I need to check. Alabama beat
Yeah,
Michigan.
let's check on that team up the road.
Yeah, I'm nervous to even look. They're playing North Carolina today.
Oh, it is. I think they're about to go into double overtime because
Wow.
I'm seeing end of overtime 81-81.
Okay.
So
So
deep
Alabama,
league this year.
they lost to somebody after they beat Michigan State. But anyway, Alabama's good.
UConn, UConn in the Phil Knight Invitational.
Alabama's good. Tennessee's good. Arkansas is pretty good. Kentucky's good. And honestly, I think my honest assessment early is Auburn has the tools to try to compete with those teams, but we've still got we're gonna have to keep working that offense and get a little more comfortable over the next few weeks before we get into SEC play, which is only a month away now, December 28th against Florida. So
Yeah,
it's coming quick. So we've got Colgate on Friday, I believe, is the next game. So we've got a few days to put this one behind us. Um, try to keep this streak going at Neville Arena. And then is it the West Coast trip? No, there's more games.
nope. We got the holiday hoopsgiving against Memphis,
That's
which I
right.
believe is on a neutral court, right?
It is in Atlanta
Yeah.
on the 10th, and then Georgia State. So those are the next three before we hit the road. Colgate, Memphis, Memphis will be a fun game.
It will be.
Memphis, they lost to this St. Louis team earlier this year, but Memphis, Penny Hardaway, that not as fiery as it was a few years ago on the recruiting trail battles that we were having with them. But it would be really nice in Atlanta where a ton of Auburn fans live. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of Auburn people there. That'll be a fun one. So those are the next three, and then we have our West Coast swing, and then we play SEC teams. So
That's right.
anyway, any last thoughts about this game, Ben?
No, I think we're really seeing this team find its identity in the non-conference early season stuff. The West Coast trip is going to be against some real competition, and that's going to tell us a lot about just how high this team's ceiling is. But if you're a fan of basketball and you've had a chance to watch them so far this season, you got to like what you see. We're getting guys minutes where they need to be. We're forging our identity, and we're very keenly aware of where the areas for improvement are. And it seems like Bruce is focusing on that and getting guys in a position to win. We're a veteran team, which I don't think we've really been able to say much about Auburn basketball in the last 10 years. So that's really exciting. We got a lot of guys that have won a lot of games. And in crucial situations, that's who you want on the floor. You want those savvy seniors, and we are loaded with them.
you've said that, and I think everybody needs to really keep that in mind. The way college basketball is right now, the way our team is with guys coming in and guys leaving, like there's not a lot of teams. We brag all the time. Still true, by the way. Auburn has the most wins in the last 5 years. I don't know if this is year six of that or year five. I forget. Six, I think. I think it's year six of our little stretch here. These guys have been part of that. The guys who have been here for 3, 4 years, um, they have this DNA. Like they've won more games than anybody in the league. And I think it's easy to gloss over that because maybe they're not the most NBA bound guys, but they are really good college basketball players who have bought into this culture that Bruce has built. And games like this, we had a lot last year that Auburn survived when they didn't play their best. I think games like today are where you really see that. Like that's the difference in pulling out a game that really in my opinion, Auburn, I'm not going to say they had no business winning, but the performance on offense, especially, is just, it's one of those games. We knew we were going to have them this year. I don't know. I think that shows up in games like this. You're right. There's a bunch of winners, on this team, and that matters.
Yeah, this wasn't nearly as much of a clunker as the Northwestern game,
Sure.
for sure. But a lot of that had to do with, I think there might have been a little bit of distraction down in Cancun for some of the guys. Maybe they didn't come in quite as focused to that Northwestern game at the end of that trip as they could have. But yeah, consistent name at the end of both of those games when you needed a basket, when you needed momentum. Alan Flanagan, a guy that has been there for a long time and has been through a lot and has thought about going somewhere else. But, Alan Flanagan, true Auburn man, true Auburn basketball player. And in a lot of ways, he's becoming the heart of this team.
Man, I love it. I feel better. I'm glad we've gotten pushed and punched a little bit these last couple games because you almost need to see that to see how your team's going to respond. We saw it last year. It's great to reel off all these wins and get to number one, but we almost started losing and getting hit in the face too late last year. And it's like we never really regained. We still won the SEC. It was a great year. I'm not like downing that, but I do think you need games like this. And we had a few last year too. But I'm just happy. I'm happy we won. You're right. We know who we are and we know where we need to get better. And for 7 games in, I feel really good about that.
I mean, look, when you're a championship caliber basketball team, there's really 6 games at the end of the year that matter. 8 if you want to include your conference tournament. And the goal is to be in the best position possible to put yourself in the ability to string together that kind of run. So although early season wins don't always translate to late season wins, although running the table in non-conference doesn't transition necessarily to conference success, it matters. It matters in a huge way because it makes your road that much easier in crunch time.
Well, and it matters how you win. And to win down 5 late at home the way we did today, that matters. Because later in the season, when you're down 4 or 5 points, the same players on the floor can look at each other and not be faking it. Hey, we're good. Let's get a stop. Let's get a score. We're good. Don't freak out. Don't panic. Let's do what we do. And
trust each other.
Yes, and play together. And I trust Flanagan to make that. And I trust KD to do something crazy out of nowhere because he's done it so many times. And I trust Wendell to make the right decision on that pick and roll, trying to put the game away late. That stuff matters. If you've never played basketball, like that stuff really matters. The human element of basketball matters. We're getting off track here. But Ben, thank you for joining. Thank you for joining the last couple, man. It's been fun. Look forward to definitely seeing you as we go throughout this year. 7-0, man. We'll take it.
7-0. Any way you can get there.
That's right. All right, man. War Eagle.
War Eagle, everybody.